History remembers Kamehameha as the unifier of the islands. Yet his rise was shadowed by betrayal and blood. At Puukohola Heiau, prophecy demanded a sacrifice. Kaiana, once Kamehameha's closest ally, turned against him and fueled Keoua's defiance. And when Keoua finally stepped ashore, the fate of both men was sealed. This was not only the death of a chief, it was the birth of a nation. This is Pu'ukohola Explained, why Keoua really died. The Hawaiian Islands stood at a crossroads. Rival chiefs vied for power, and the balance of loyalty and survival shifted with every tide. Old alliances fractured as whispers of prophecy filled the air, prophecies that spoke of unity, but only through sacrifice. At Kawaihae, Kamehameha ordered stones to be hauled across the land, each rock laid into place by the hands of his people, each step watched by the eyes of his priests. This was Puukohola, a heiau built not only of lava rock, but of ambition and divine mandate. It was said that if the temple were completed and consecrated with the blood of a rival, the islands would finally fall under one rule. Far from this rising fortress, Keōua Kūʻahuʻula weighed his own fate. He was a chief of lineage and strength, yet beset by omens of death. Some urged him to resist, others to submit, but the path ahead offered no safety. Every choice carried the shadow of destiny. Thus the stage was set. The temple of war awaited its sacrifice, and the tide of unification prepared to sweep across Hawaii. In the silence before the final act, all knew that the fate of Keoua would become the fate of the islands themselves. Chapter 1. The Rise of Pu'ukohola. Puukohola Heiau is often remembered simply as the temple that sealed Kamehameha's victory. Yet beneath its stones lies a story rarely told. Most accounts emphasize the prophecy that if Kamehameha dedicated this heiau with the blood of a rival chief, the gods would grant him the islands. But fewer ask how the temple itself became a weapon before any blood was spilled. The labor of building Pu'ukohola was not only spiritual, it was political theater. Thousands of men were summoned from across Hawaii, their loyalty tested in the grueling work of hauling stones from Pololu Valley, miles away, through relays of human hands. To serve Kamehameha in this monumental project was to pledge allegiance, to bind one's body and lineage to his cause. Chiefs who hesitated risked being seen as disloyal, while those who obeyed grew invested in Kamehameha's rise. The heiau's location also carried meaning often overlooked. Perched above the harbor at Kawaihae, it was not just sacred ground, it was a statement of control over the northern approach to Hawaiʻi Island, a place where trade and travel converged. By building there, Kamehameha claimed both the spiritual high ground and the physical gateway to his kingdom. Even the temple's design whispers strategy. Pu'ukohola was constructed in the style of Oahu Heiau, not the older Hawaiian forms of Hawaiʻi Island. This choice may reveal the influence of foreign knowledge arriving with Kaiana and other ali'i who had traveled beyond Hawaii. It was as if Kamehameha was aligning himself with something broader, projecting authority that stretched beyond one island's traditions. Foreign observers also noticed how the building process itself mirrored European displays of kingship. Ships arriving from Britain and America described the spectacle of thousands moving in unison, carrying stones in a human chain that stretched for miles. For these foreigners, the scene was a demonstration of centralized authority. For Kamehameha's rivals, It was a warning that his reach extended into every valley and village. What we often miss is how the Heiau was already shaping destiny long before Keoua's death. Its walls rose as both fortress and altar, warning rivals that Kamehameha's rule would rest not only on force, but on divine sanction. The temple was prophecy-made stone, a place where politics, religion, and fear merged into one. In this light, Pu'ukohola was not just a setting for sacrifice, but a declaration. Kamehameha would unite the islands not only with warriors and guns, but with the weight of the gods themselves. The Heiau's stones carried voices louder than drums, and its shadow stretched over every choice that Keoua and his allies would soon face. Chapter 2. Keoua's Journey. Keōua Kūʻahuʻula's final voyage to Kawaihae has often been framed as a fatal mistake. Yet his decision was far more complex than legend suggests. In the late 1790s, Hawaiian Island was torn between drought, warfare, and prophecy. For Keoua, every course of action carried danger, and the choice to sail north may have seemed like the least perilous of his options. Keoua ruled Ka'u and Puna, regions that had long resisted Kamehameha's authority. These lands were not only politically defiant, but geologically unstable. Kilauea, the ever-active volcano, erupted violently during Keoua's campaigns. Oral traditions tell of his warriors caught in blasts of ash and poisonous gas near the Kapu desert, an event some took as a divine judgment against him. In Hawaiian thought, natural disasters were never random. They signaled the gods' shifting favor and carried political consequences as heavy as any battle. At the same time, Kaiana's defection reshaped the political chessboard. Once one of Kamehameha's most trusted lieutenants, Kaiana had joined forces with Keoua's rivals. His knowledge of Western weapons, fortifications, and tactics gave Keoua symbolic strength, but it also made him a marked man. To Kamehameha, Kaiana's betrayal was not only personal, it was a breach of trust that threatened the very foundation of his authority. By aligning with this traitor, Keoua was now cast as the embodiment of resistance to Kamehameha's destiny. Keoua's position grew even more precarious as famines spread across parts of his domain. Crops failed under the ash of volcanic eruptions, and villages weakened by scarcity became less able to support his campaigns. Chiefs loyal to him weighed their allegiance carefully, questioning whether continued defiance would bring only ruin. Each eruption, each failed harvest, each whisper of discontent added pressure to a leader already hemmed in by enemies. Why, then, did Keoua sail toward Pu'ukohola, knowing the omens and dangers that surrounded him? Some traditions speak of diplomacy, that he hoped to negotiate peace, or at least delay open war, buying time to rebuild his strength. Others point to prophecy, that by placing himself at the Heiau, he might test or even overturn the fate promised to Kamehameha. A darker interpretation suggests he was persuaded by members of his own court, who believed his death might end their suffering by satisfying both the gods and Kamehameha's ambitions. In this view, Keoua was not only a chief making choices, but a pawn sacrificed by those closest to him. There is also the possibility that Keoua recognized the inevitability of his fate. In Hawaiian traditions of chiefly conduct, facing destiny with dignity was sometimes valued more than clinging to life in disgrace. By sailing into danger, he may have sought to secure his mana, ensuring that his name would endure even if his body fell. His journey was therefore not simply a march toward execution. It was a calculated, if desperate, step within a world where politics, faith, and survival were inseparable. Keoua's canoe did not just carry a chief, it carried the weight of Kau's independence, the burden of volcanic omens, and the final gamble of a man caught between destiny and defiance. Chapter 3. The Death at the Shore. The meeting at Kawaihae is often told as a single brutal moment. Keoua steps ashore, is struck down, and carried into Puukohola Heiau. Yet when we look closer, the scene reveals layers of ritual, strategy, and political theater that transformed an execution into an act of world-shaping symbolism. When Keoua's canoes appeared off the coast, Kamehameha's men controlled every vantage point. The harbor at Kawaihae was a narrow stage, carefully chosen. Its waters funneled arrivals directly toward the shadow of the new heiau. Keoua could not approach without passing under the gaze of priests and warriors alike. Accounts describe Keoua disembarking and being welcomed, then suddenly attacked. Some sources say he was invited under a flag of truce. Others hint that the ambush was prearranged, a betrayal cloaked in ceremony. What unites these traditions is the immediacy. Keoua never crossed the threshold of Pu'ukoholā alive. He fell at the shoreline, his body dragged into the heiau to complete the sacrifice. But this detail matters. For some Hawaiian traditions, a consecrated sacrifice had to be slain within the sacred boundaries. The fact that Keoua died before entering suggests tension between ritual requirement and political necessity. Was his death rushed, the result of warriors unwilling to risk hesitation? Or did the priests bend the rules of Kapu to match the urgency of unification? Either way, it marked a rare moment when political power dictated religious form, not the other way around. Kaiana's shadow also lingers over the scene. Though absent from Kawaihae, his defection had primed Kamehameha to act ruthlessly. Keoua's body symbolized not just one rival, but the broader rebellion fed by Kaiana's betrayal. In death, Keoua became the scapegoat that erased Kamehameha's vulnerabilities and cemented his claim to divine favor. Foreigners who later heard the story emphasized the spectacle, the sacrifice of a chief at the very moment a temple was finished. For them, it echoed biblical or classical precedents, reinforcing the idea that Hawaii was a stage where ancient drama unfolded anew. For Hawaiians, however, the act was not theater, it was prophecy fulfilled. The gods had demanded blood, and history answered. Thus, the shoreline at Kawaihae was more than the site of a killing. It was the hinge on which the islands turned. In Keoua's fall, Kamehameha rose unchallenged, and Pu'ukohola became not just a temple, but the altar on which an independent Hawaii was born. Chapter 4. Aftermath and Legacy. With Keoua's death, the stones of Puukohola Heiau became more than a temple. They became the foundation of a new political order. For the first time, Kamehameha stood unchallenged on Hawaiʻi Island, free to expand his authority beyond its shores. Yet the aftermath was not only triumph, it was also a moment of reckoning, where violence, ritual, and prophecy reshaped the meaning of power. Among Kamehameha's supporters, Keoua's sacrifice was remembered as fulfillment of divine law. Priests pointed to the prophecy. The heiau had been completed, blood consecrated it, and the gods had granted unity. But within Keoua's homeland of Ka'u, the memory was bitter. For them, the chief had not fallen in honorable battle, but had been betrayed. Oral traditions lingered with unease, recalling his final voyage as an act of manipulation rather than destiny. This dual memory, sacred victory for one side, injustice for the other, remains a fracture in Hawaiian storytelling even today. The consequences extended far beyond memory. By removing his greatest rival, Kamehameha freed resources to consolidate alliances on Maui and prepare for the campaigns that would eventually carry him to Oahu and Kauai. The heiau at Puukohola became a visible warning to all who might resist. The gods and politics were now one. Every chief who passed its walls was reminded that disobedience could be answered not just with spears, but with sacrifice. Foreigners, too, interpreted the event in ways that shaped Hawaii's image abroad. Missionaries and traders recorded the killing of a high chief as evidence of a culture steeped in heathen violence, a view that would later justify their efforts to reshape Hawaiian society. Yet these same foreigners also marveled at Kamehameha's discipline and statecraft, comparing him to kings and emperors of the Old World. In their eyes, the sacrifice of Keoua revealed both savagery and sovereignty, an image that would haunt Hawaii's history for generations. Perhaps most striking is how Keoua's death redefined leadership itself. In Hawaiian thought, mana, the spiritual power of a chief, could be transferred, consumed, or extinguished. By being offered at Pu'ukohola, Keoua's mana did not vanish. It was absorbed into the structure of the heiau, magnifying Kamehameha's authority. In this sense, the temple was not just a place of worship. It became a reservoir of political and spiritual energy, binding the fate of Hawaii to one man's vision. The legacy of Pu'ukohola is therefore not simply architectural. It is moral, spiritual, and political. For some, it symbolizes unification and the genius of Kamehameha's rise. For others, it stands as a reminder that Hawaii's unity was built on betrayal as much as prophecy. And for all, it remains a site where the boundary between history and memory blurs, where the death of one chief gave birth to a kingdom whose echoes still shape Hawaii today. History often celebrates victors, but the silence around Keoua's death tells us something deeper. His sacrifice was not just the price of unity, it was the reminder that kingdoms rise through choices marked by faith, ambition, and betrayal. Standing at Puukohola today, one feels both the weight of stone and the echo of voices that will never be heard again. Hawaii's unification was not inevitable. It was carved into existence, and its costs still resonate in memory. For some, Puukohola is a monument of triumph. For others, it is a scar of betrayal. But for all, it is a place where prophecy and politics collided, where a chief's last breath gave birth to a kingdom that would face its own storms in centuries to come. If you want to keep exploring stories like this, consider joining our Timeless Tales membership. You'll get early access to upcoming episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and a closer look at the mysteries we uncover. And don't forget to check out our new spring shop collection, including designs inspired by Hawaii's chiefs and warriors. Every membership and every purchase helps us keep history alive. Facts first, mystery intact. Mahalo nui loa for watching, and until next time, aloha.
Hoi mai ka lai ka moana e ho, ka puku I ka palamalama e ho, ke au. Hoi ka lane, hoi ka lane, hoi ka lane. He mai na hopu, ka lai ka ho. Halo o ke anu e. Mai ka pua kunu e, mai ka ua oi.
kalani e